based on a true story that happened in 1954, October 6th. Amber was 23 that autumn morning when the story that would mark her name in military records began to unfold. The town where she grew up woke under a thin fog, and the sun took its time rising above the cold roofs. She had always been known there, the girl with the calm smile and the sharp, observing eyes. Her beauty wasn't loud or polished. It was the quiet kind that made people look twice and wonder what she was thinking. Teachers remembered her as bright but restless, always wanting to go beyond what small towns offered. Her father, a mechanic, and her mother, a school clerk, were proud of her degree, though it had come at great cost. When she finished college that summer, she thought her life would open like a door. Instead, she found only walls. The letters she sent out came back politely saying, "We regret to inform you." Days blended into weeks of searching, waiting, and disappointment. Then her father mentioned her uncle, General Robert Caldwell, a man whose very name drew salute in the U.S. Army. He could help, her father had said quietly over dinner. He knows what discipline can do for a young person. Amber had smiled, half hopeful, half uncertain. But the next morning she wrote to the general. A few weeks later, she received a letter with his seal, report to Fort Claiborne for recruitment consideration. That was the beginning. Training was harder than she imagined. The ground was always cold, the air thick with sweat and orders. 9 months of running, shouting, crawling, and obeying. The instructors said the Army doesn't build strength, it reveals it. And Amber's strength, hidden beneath her charm, began to show. When graduation came, she stood in her uniform under the sun, proud and exhausted. General Caldwell attended the ceremony. His eyes, usually unreadable, softened with pride. "You did well," he said simply. She didn't need more than that. Her parents back home celebrated. The small house filled with laughter and stories. They spoke of how their daughter had found her purpose. For a while, everything was perfect. 61 days later, she was called back for official deployment. She kissed her mother goodbye, waved to her father at the gate, and promised to write. None of them knew that promise would fade into something darker than silence. The base was larger, stricter, and colder than the training camp. Yet Amber adjusted quickly. Her charm worked where orders could not. She greeted everyone with respect, listened carefully, remembered small details about their families. People trusted her. It started small, conversations after drills, quiet laughter during breaks. Soon, men began visiting her tent for advice, for company, for the comfort of a kind listener. Some were young and lonely. Others were older, carrying decades of service on their shoulders. She made each of them feel seen. The line between friendship and fascination blurred. One by one, they confided in her, sometimes saying more than they should. Names of officers, shipment times, bits of information that seemed harmless when spoken softly in the dark. Amber kept her composure. She wrote nothing down. She didn't have to. Her memory was flawless. Commander Harrison, the man in charge of the camp, noticed her early. He was in his 40s, steady and quiet, with the kind of authority that didn't need shouting. He admired her dedication and discipline. At first, he saw her as an example to others. But admiration has a way of turning into attachment. And attachment can turn even a commander into a fool. Their talks started formally, performance reviews, duty schedules, but grew longer each week. She spoke gently, thanked him sincerely, made him feel appreciated in ways the Army never had. For a man who lived among orders and silence, her voice was warmth. When the camp lights went out, he sometimes found himself walking toward her quarters without knowing why. Those late-night conversations became his escape from the constant tension of command. He told her things he told no one else. That was how it began to unravel. She listened, asked careful questions, never too direct, always curious. Over time, he revealed fragments of classified information, dates, movements, discussions he thought were harmless to share with someone he trusted. Amber remembered everything. Amber was granted 3 months leave to recover from the trauma, but she didn't rest. She met with her contacts in secret places, passing along every piece of intelligence she had gathered. Her payments were discreetly transferred to foreign accounts. She thought she was untouchable. What she didn't know was that the Army had been watching her since the day she met Harrison. They had intercepted one of her letters months before. Rather than arrest her immediately, they decided to follow the trail. let her lead them to whoever waited on the other side. So they gave her false documents to steal, fake mission details to pass on, made her think she was outsmarting them. They wanted to see how deep the network went. By the time she realized the truth, it was far too late. If you're still listening, take a second to subscribe, because stories like this, buried in history, deserve to be remembered. Now, listen carefully. What happens next shows how quickly pride turns to downfall. The night after Amber's graduation from basic training was quiet. The sky above the camp was endless, stars scattered like distant lanterns, shimmering above tents and metal barracks that still smelled of oil and gunpowder. Amber stood by herself, her army jacket slightly open, breathing in the cool desert air. She thought about home. Her parents had written her a long letter that morning, her mother's handwriting shaky with joy, her father's proud words simple and short. "You've made us proud, Amber." She smiled faintly at that line, tucking the letter into her pocket. For the first time in a long while, she felt she had done something right. But little did she know, life was about to twist in a direction no one could have imagined. When she finally returned home after 9 months of training, she wasn't the same person who had left. Her body was stronger, her posture straighter, and her eyes, they had seen things most civilians never would. Her parents celebrated her return with a small dinner, laughter, and photos. Her father even raised a toast. "To Amber, the soldier of our family." Days passed quickly, and after about 61 days of leave, Amber packed her duffel bag again and returned to her unit. The camp she once trained in now felt different, colder, heavier. Everyone seemed tired. Even the air felt thick with silence. But there was one man who still carried an aura of authority and calm. Commander Harrison. He was a decorated man in his early 40s, tall, with graying hair and a stare that could freeze any soldier. He was respected, even feared. But beneath that iron demeanor, there was exhaustion. Long months at the front lines had taken a toll on him. Amber admired him, not in a romantic way at first, but with the same admiration a young soldier gives a leader who commands without shouting. And yet, in moments of silence, something in Harrison's eyes seemed lonely. For months, she continued this routine. The soldiers thought it was love. Harrison thought it was secrecy, but Amber knew it was something far more dangerous. Every word, every confession, every careless whisper, she collected it all. Because Amber wasn't there for glory. She wasn't just a soldier. She was there for a mission. Her uncle, General Reed, believed she wanted to serve her country. But the truth was far from that. Somewhere, deep in her past, there had been a deal, one that tied her to forces far beyond the camp, beyond even her nation's flag. And as the days went on, those secrets began to move like shadows. It started with whispers. They always do. A private claimed he saw Commander Harrison leaving Amber's quarters one night, his jacket half-buttoned and his face pale in the moonlight. Another soldier swore he heard voices behind her door long after midnight. But in a camp filled with secrets, who was brave enough to speak aloud? The days rolled by like slow thunder. Training continued. Marching, drills, discipline, everything on the surface looked fine. But underneath, the air was heavy. The soldiers avoided eye contact. Rumors traveled faster than bullets. And Amber, she smiled through all of it. Calm, beautiful, unbothered. When Harrison walked past her during inspections, his face gave away nothing. His tone was clipped, professional, but his eyes betrayed him. There was something there, a silent storm. Guilt, maybe, or fear. The truth was, he knew he had gone too far. He'd told her things he shouldn't have. At first, they were small details, movements of certain units, arrival times of supply trucks. But as nights went on, and drinks blurred the edges of caution, he told her more. He told her about operations no one outside command was supposed to know. Amber listened, always with that same gentle curiosity, always with eyes that promised understanding. Then she started writing. Not letters home, as she claimed, but notes, coded, quiet, and dangerous. She'd burn some, send others through discreet channels. And the most chilling part? She wasn't acting alone. She had a contact, a name whispered in encrypted messages. A foreign man stationed across the ocean. The agreement was simple, information for money. But not just money, power, recognition. A promise that she'd never have to live like a shadow again. Still, Amber played her part perfectly. During the day, she was the model soldier. During the night, she was the soft voice behind every man's weakness. Weeks turned into months. The camp grew colder as summer faded. Some soldiers began to notice things missing from files, strange phone calls, coded messages left unclaimed. But no one wanted to accuse the general's niece. No one dared. Until one night, the night that changed everything. It was late. The wind was sharp. Harrison had just returned from a strategy meeting when a knock came at his door. He opened it, and there she was. Amber, wearing her uniform, a soft smile on her face. "Commander," she whispered, "you look tired." He hesitated but let her in. They spoke for hours, about war, about fear, about how men like him carried the weight of nations. And then, like before, she poured him a drink. That night, he told her everything. Every plan, every strategy, every weakness they had. It all came out, soaked in whiskey and guilt. What he didn't know was that someone else had been listening. 2 soldiers on night patrol had seen her light flicker in the tent. They knew the rules. No one was supposed to visit at those hours. They got closer, and through a gap in the tent's fabric, they saw what no one should have seen. The commander, vulnerable, spilling military secrets to a woman who smiled like an angel but looked like a shadow. By dawn, the camp was restless. Harrison woke to a call from headquarters. He was to report immediately. He tried to act calm, but the world around him had changed overnight. Amber was nowhere to be seen. His name was whispered across the camp. Every salute he received that morning was colder than before. When he entered the command tent, he saw faces, officers, investigators, even his superior, all waiting for him. There were papers on the table, transcripts, letters, evidence, and at the top, a signature. Amber's. He froze. The room went silent. Someone spoke softly. "Commander Harrison, you are under arrest for misconduct and breach of national security." The words hit him harder than any bullet ever could. He turned to the window, searching for her face, for some explanation, some sign that it was all a mistake. But she wasn't there. Amber had vanished. Back home, newspapers ran wild stories. "Decorated commander arrested for scandal in camp," the headlines read. Some called it betrayal, others called it tragedy. But only Amber knew the truth. And while the world blamed the commander, she was already miles away, crossing borders in silence, carrying secrets worth more than gold. If you're still listening to this story, take a second and hit subscribe. These true stories from history deserve to be heard, and your support helps keep them alive. Now, back to Amber. She arrived in a quiet city overseas, where she met a man in a dark coat. He spoke little English, but he knew her name. He took the files, the letters, the coded messages, and handed her a silver case. Inside, money. A fortune. She had done it. She had completed her mission. But fate wasn't done with her yet. Because the truth was, while Amber believed she had fooled them all, the United States had been watching her long before she ever stepped foot in that camp. The files she thought she stole were decoys. The secrets she believed were true had been planted. Commander Harrison wasn't a fool. He was bait. He had discovered her deception weeks earlier. He'd reported it quietly, working with intelligence officers to build a trap. They played along, feeding her false data, letting her think she was in control. So when she met with the foreign agents that night, the air was thick not with victory, but with waiting. Unmarked vehicles surrounded the meeting spot. Officers stepped out. Flashing lights pierced the darkness. Amber froze as she realized everything she had built, every lie, every secret, every manipulation, had led her here. She tried to run, but there was nowhere left to go. And as they handcuffed her, one officer said, "It's over, Amber. The game's been over for weeks." She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She only looked up at the night sky, the same stars she once admired back in training, and whispered something no one understood. That night, she was taken into custody. The next morning, the newspapers changed their headlines. This time, it wasn't about Harrison. It was about her. Female soldier arrested as foreign spy. Hidden operation uncovered. Amber was sentenced to 65 years in prison without parole. And that's how the story of Amber, once a charming young graduate with dreams, ended behind cold walls and locked doors. If you've listened this far, make sure to subscribe. There are more stories like this, stories the world forgot, but should never be erased.